Hey guys, today we're reviewing Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. We have the backdrop of Madeira Island, Portugal, a great way to get some good reading. So let's just get right into it. For this book was sadly quite disappointing, but there is going to be some people that will definitely enjoy this book, but just for me, it didn't quite work. So you should read this if you want a coming of age story about innocence and acceptance with light dystopian sci-fi elements, with the ending uncovering what the coming of age actually means. And you have to be okay with not knowing what that means for most of the book. So you basically just have kind of a coming of age story with light sci-fi elements. So if that sounds interesting to you, and it is a bit of a slow burn, if that sounds interesting to you, then give this book a go. But if at its surface you're kind of like not super intrigued, I don't think this will be a hit for you. And it was definitely not a hit for me. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. I was quite disappointed by this book actually, and it's a bit of a complex rating. Actually, I was going to give this book a lot lower, maybe my lowest review ever until the ending. And then I said, okay, now I get what this is about and these kinds of things. And this book is actually one of those books that is always better on retrospect. And the book definitely gives a lot of material to discuss. It's good material for discussion. And it will be far better on a reread, far better on a reread. And I can see why some people might recognize it as a very like quality or high quality piece of literature, but just for me, it didn't hit. And so, like, we can start off with the plot, perhaps. That's a good place. I mean, it would have been far lower. I gave it 2.25 out of 5. It would have been far lower if not for the ending, which I was dreading the ending because I'm like, where are we going? And honestly, this book was a slog for me. I think it took me about a month and a half to read, and while I was reading other books, because it was just such a slog. The coming of age felt so boring, felt so uninteresting. It felt so, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just not that good of a reader. But this is just how I was viewing it. It was just super boring, and the thing is that the plot mechanic doesn't, it's not, how do you say, it's not included enough to make the coming of age seem meaningful. It really just felt, especially at the very early beginning, the time with the characters being like teenagers and kids was dragged on for way too long. It felt like I was reading, sorry for the comparison, but like a teenager keeping up with the Kardashians, just like this melodrama of this, that, this, and the teacher said this, and it felt extremely I'm not interested in reading something like that at all. So this coming of age, and then even into the later years, into teenage years, it doesn't become interesting until the adult period. And then with the adult, the plot mechanic starts to become more apparent, significantly so. And then these kinds of questions about innocence and acceptance and other, let's say, without spoiling, other central questions of right and wrong, coming of age, social conditioning, these kinds of questions really come to shine. But it takes far too long to get there, in my opinion. That like, I read the last, I think it was 20%, like, in 2 days. But man, the other half, I almost DNF'd it, but I'm not a believer in DNFing unless it's absolutely horrific. But yeah, I got close a couple times, but I had actually recommended this book to someone else, and so let's just read this together. And so, yeah, so for the plot, this kind of dragging on of this coming of age, and even with coming of age, it's not one of my favorite tropes or my favorite themes. And then in combination with this, not so. But again, it might hit for some people, and I do think on a reread, appreciate it significantly more, but I just don't want to reread it, and that's just the truth of the matter. And then that kind of goes into characters, which I only gave a 1.5 out of 5. And if you're going to write, I think in science fiction, if you're going to write one of these kinds of books, you need to excel in one of these other categories, whether it's characters, plot, thought-provokingness, prose, or dialogue. And this book just doesn't excel in any of those, which just drags everything even more. And so you have this plot mechanic that's very, very interesting. And also the way it's done, it is unique. Like with this specific topic, it's done in a very kind of a really unique way that can spur a lot of discussion and thought. And in this way, I've actually kind of thought a lot about some themes, but the characters were super weak in this, super weak, in my opinion. Like we're following like the main character, and it's just dragging on. Again, it felt like I'm watching or reading like a little bit of a reality TV show with teenagers, and I know that's probably a super unfair comparison, but that's just what it felt like while I was reading. So in this sense, the other characters felt super shallow, super not a whole lot going on. And I suppose like with Tommy, like there was a little bit more bubbling on the surface, but beneath the surface, but it just never got there until the end for me, and that's just problematic. So yeah, the characters were super weak. Like I don't really, even at this point, I don't have very much interesting to say about the characters. Thought-provokingness is clearly the strongest category here, 3 out of 5, and that's more on retrospect. I definitely enjoyed thinking about this book. Again, the themes of social conditioning is a very nice question here about like how much do we do just based on our environment? Are we products of our environment? Some criticisms of the book about like I think are super unfair about, well, they would have resisted more or things like this, and that's not the theme of the book. I think the theme of the book, which I do like, is it's conflict is not the main tension of the book. The tension of the book is the coming of age and like the acceptance of this. Like the characters are just accepting of their fate. So that's the tension, and you looking for a point of resistance is kind of the point, and obviously it doesn't come, and maybe that our definition of resistance is usually related to conflict, and there's just no conflict here. And so that kind of tidbit is very interesting to me, and I do think that's more representative of reality in some ways, is that sometimes people, like, I mean, we talk about this at my job a lot, but like resistance isn't, doing acts of violence, and maybe violence is not the wrong word, but acts of force, let's say. Resistance can be just continuing to live. Resistance can be just accepting and not allowing that to shape your life, and you take control of your life and your destiny, even when you know your fate. So these kinds of questions are super interesting, especially the social conditioning aspect. I think the criticisms of like are quite shallow to say that they should have resisted, or no, that's not the point of the book. The point of the book is like this: what does social conditioning mean? What does acceptance mean? How do these things interact with each other? How do these things make humans do things or believe in certain things or accept certain things? I mean, just look at the diversity of the world. I mean, it's very apparent that from an early age you will be more accepting of certain things just based on your environment and what you're taught. So I think on this sense, this book does quite a good job. Yeah, for thought-provokingness, it could have been even higher, but again, just the book you don't get to that thought-provokingness until the last act, which is the last 20% of the book. And yeah, on like a retrospect, I do like thinking about it, and I would be interested in having a discussion with somebody about this, but then it'd just be more about the themes, not exactly the book itself. And then let's go into prose and dialogue, which is 1.75 out of 5, and that's the other thing is this book does not excel in prose. It's not super unique in style. It doesn't have something that's pulling me in. Just the coming of age writing felt shallow. Though when some of these themes that are arising, there is some depth, but when it came to the characters, and the book does later on write very well, like this innocence and this acceptance, and I know I'm repeating these themes, but it does provide depth to them, but it's just getting there again that's quite difficult and honestly just really boring. And the dialogue to me is very boring until the very end. The dialogue felt quite boring, so maybe it's just me. For me, the weakest part of Never Let Me Go was by far the world building. I gave that 1.25 out of 5. Unfortunately, just again, as everything that I mentioned previously, I was not interested in this world at all. I was just interested in seeing why are these characters experiencing what they're experiencing. That was the thing that kept me slowly coming back into the book. And although I have seen the movie before, so I knew where this was going, but yeah, the world building, like I wasn't interested to know more about the school. I wasn't more interested to know about what was happening around these characters, and it wasn't very well developed. Again, on retrospect, there are some really cool elements, but again, I wasn't a huge fan of the world building at all, and I don't really have much more to say about that, so we can move on. And that brings me to the last category, which is just fun in general, 1.5 out of 5. Again, for the first 80% of the book, I did not really have a great time reading it. So yeah, that's just how it goes sometimes. I mean, if some of you enjoyed it more, please let me know. It does have a lower overall Goodreads score kind of rating, but I think there is room for somebody to like this. I do think, as I said before, if some of the stuff I said was interesting to you, you will get something out of this book. I do think, though, for a lot of people, this book will be a miss. And now we're actually just going to go into the spoiler section. I just wanted to say some of my thoughts on there. So just forewarning, from now on, spoilers. Okay. Okay. Now we're doing spoilers. Yeah, the ending. This, again, the theme of cloning and the ethicalness of cloning. I love that it does combine cloning with the meaning of social conditioning. Is it like just as much as the clones have been socially conditioned, the teachers and the staff have been socially conditioned as well. They're not innocent of this social conditioning and what is to believe to be right. I mean, they're basically growing clones for donations, and they've been socially conditioned to accept that as a reality, and they might have ways to make it better, but the fate remains the same. So I think these kinds of themes were very interesting, and that theme itself, like the concept itself, growing clones for donations, and the point of tension not being like the clones revolting or the clones doing something to break this cycle. This theme is super interesting, and actually even doing it in a coming of age way is super interesting, right? It's just that, and it talked a little bit, like it gave some hints, and maybe I'm just not a smart enough reader to pick it up, but it just wasn't integrated enough for me. It just really felt like, okay, it's just a school of kids, and they are doing something for the future, like in their adult life, but it just took too long to implement that, because then when I'm reading, I'm not reading a coming of age story about acceptance and innocence. I'm reading a coming of age story of just someone growing up at a boarding school. And that's the problem, I think. It just took far to that implementation. And I'm not saying you needed to just show me right away, but you need to just show me right away something more is off. Something's like, the kids are accepting something, or being, maybe not the kids, but why they're cutting down the beginning part or the middle part, I don't know. It's just too long to get there. But that theme itself and it being done in this way, I does think provide a lot of room of discussion, and in that sense it was really, really interesting. So, but sadly, yeah, I wouldn't be able to recommend this book to a lot of people, and yeah, that's just me. So if you have some different thoughts, please let me know. And yeah, I will definitely read one of his other books, but again, a much better reread, and I do think his concepts will be interesting. So I definitely want to read a book in the future, but not right away. So thank you so much. Let me know what you guys think.